Now, this is the scandal that has been dominating social media over the last few days. I'm, of course, talking about the grooming gang scandal, or as I call it, the rape gang scandal. As I discussed yesterday with former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, looking at the latest revelations to come from places like Oxford, we now need a national inquiry about this crisis. The real question everybody out there is currently asking themselves, as I asked the former Home Secretary, is why haven't more heads rolled? Why haven't more people in the establishment been held responsible for this horrific scandal? As GB News' very own Charlie Peters has pointed out, no police officer or government employee has ever been imprisoned for their gross misconduct in dealing with the grooming gang's horror. The grim reality is that for too many people in positions of power, they have ignored this scandal for too long, and they have avoided telling people the truth. Now, I'll be speaking tonight to former Rochdale MP Simon Danczuk about his first-hand experience of that in a moment. But first, just think, who could forget the time that Labour MP Naz Shah liked and retweeted a Twitter post that said those abused girls in Rotherham and elsewhere just need to shut their mouths for the good of diversity, before later claiming it was an accident. And who could forget how the few brave people, courageous people who have dared to speak the truth about this scandal, who have spoken up on behalf of those children, have often then been vilified as an assortment of Islamophobes or far-right agitators. The grooming gang scandal is the greatest stain on our national record, and that's why today I asked Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips onto the programme to discuss this scandal. And guess what? I didn't hear back. I didn't hear anything. Jess Phillips is normally an outspoken feminist. She talks endlessly about protecting women and girls from misogyny and abuse. But when it comes to the issue of the grooming gangs, when it comes to defending women and girls from predominantly Muslim Pakistani gangs, she seems to be completely silent. She has also rejected Oldham Council's request for a national inquiry, claiming it is for Oldham Council alone to decide how to deal with this. It is not the case for a national inquiry is not needed. But the Labour Party has established nearly 70 reviews and inquiries since taking office. So why the general disinterest when it comes to the issue of the grooming gangs? Well, one explanation, I would suggest, might be this. Labour is simply worried about alienating and losing the Muslim vote. Take the former Shadow Paymaster General, Jonathan Ashworth, one of the Labour Party's foremost frontbench spokespersons during the general election campaign back in July. Well, he unexpectedly lost his seat to Gaza independent Shaukat Adam. Indeed, the independent Gaza MPs were elected at the last election, causing a lot of chaos in Labour-held seats. But even the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, secured a majority of just a few hundred votes because of that strong Gaza vote in his constituency. And the minister who made this decision, Jess Phillips, nearly lost her seat to a Gaza independent too, securing a majority of just a few hundred votes. So could the fundamental threat that is actually posing the Labour Party in these heavily Muslim seats be the reason behind Labour's reluctance to treat the grooming gang scandal with the attention that it really deserves? Well, either way, let me say this, because so few people in the corridors of power appear willing to say it. What we need in this country is a national inquiry to name and shame the complicit public officials in councils, the police and the legal system. And we need to start deporting all those foreign nationals who have dual citizenship, removing them from the country. That's my view. What's yours? Let me know at gbnews.com/yoursay or tweet me at GoodwinMJ. But right now, I'm joined by Reform MP Rupert Low, who has been campaigning, I think it's fair to say, in recent weeks and months for the government, for the state to release data and information about mass immigration. But he's now turning his attention to this issue to ask the Home Office a series of pressing questions. Rupert, if I may, what is it about this scandal, this grooming gang scandal, this rape gang scandal, that you find most alarming?
Well, I'm glad you said rape gangs, Matt, because I think that's what they are. And I don't think there's any point in beating around the bush. You've got to call things what they are, and I think they are rape gangs rather than grooming gangs. And I saw J.K. Rowling agreed with me on Twitter today, which is great. So my view on this, it was triggered really by just reading some transcripts as a result, I think, of Fraser Nelson's article last week. And we did a tweet on the back of that. And that seems to have gone completely viral.
And just to be clear, Rupert, this was an article by Fraser Nelson saying that we do not have any problems with integration in Britain. Just to be clear about that, that Britain is integrated.
Indeed. But these are transcripts of they're quite old court cases. But again, I as you know, Matt, I'm new to Parliament, and I think one of the reasons why these things are now breaking is because you've got 5 MPs who are from outside the two-party system. You know, the Blues and the Reds. We've equally got Twitter now controlled by a libertarian in the form of Elon Musk, and as you quite rightly say, he's been tweeting about this quite aggressively and very fairly today. So I think the key here is, like all of the things I've been trying to do, this alerted my attention to the fact that this is another example of government which is not transparent, of issues that have not been transparently brought to the fore, which involves vulnerable young white women. And it is, I think also, it involves power. It involves, the block voting. As you quite rightly said in your introduction, it involves a lot of Labour. There's a lot of Labour running through this. I think there's a lot of questions to be answered by the judiciary. I think there's a lot of questions to be answered by the police. I think we should have a national inquiry. And it was interesting that all the Tories have jumped in on the back of what I've been doing today. And, they've had plenty of chance to do something about this. They've been in power for 14 years, and they haven't picked it up and run with it. Equally, Labour don't show any signs of it. As you say, Jess Phillips is ducking the issue at the moment, which is disgraceful. So my view is quite simply, we should have a national inquiry. It should be totally transparent. It should be available to the public. Those people who are foreign nationals who've raped young white girls should be immediately deported. Those people with dual nationality should have their British citizenship stripped and they should be deported. Any family members who've been involved in this knowingly should be deported if they're foreign, if they're British, if they are a government official, if they're from the police, if they're from the judiciary, I don't care. Everybody should be treated equally under the law. They should all have the full force of the law brought down on their heads.
Great, Rupert, thank you.
Matt, this is a disgraceful example of right and wrong.
Yeah.
There's no grey in this. This is black or white. It's right or wrong, and we need this to be absolutely, like the post office, like a lot of other things that need to be sorted out. This needs to be absolutely dealt with in a transparent and clinical way.
Well, Rupert, just let me pick up on that post office point. I don't think anybody viewing this would disagree with that point. This is fundamentally about evil. I don't even think this is about criminality. Having viewed the court transcripts, it goes way beyond criminality. This is evil, as close to evil as I've ever seen in my lifetime. So, national inquiry, yes, agree with you. Deporting foreign nationals with dual citizenship. We should be using the foreign aid budget. We should be using the visa programs to apply pressure on the likes of Pakistan to take these guys back. I mean, are you saying basically then that Reform are going to be making this a big issue in the year ahead? Is this going to be part of your pitch to the country?
Well, as you've probably seen, I've posted on Twitter. We've asked, I think, with 16 questions gone in today to the Home Office. We put them on Twitter. They're pretty clinical. In the same way that we've asked questions about almost every aspect of government. And I have to tell you that almost every stone I turn up, I find a cowpat underneath riddled with maggots. So, look, I mean, we need some proper government, Matt. And I think we need ministers who are capable of holding the civil service to account. We need people who are not frightened. And the job of an MP and the job of government is to govern. And it's to hold people to account, and it's to ask difficult questions. It's to actually raise issues that are in the interest of the British people. And the more I sit in Parliament at the age of 67, having worked like a lot of other good English people have worked their way, they pay their taxes, they assume everybody in Parliament knows more than they do and is better qualified than they are. Let me tell you, Matt, they very definitely aren't.
Yeah,
and for all those people who think they're being governed by an elite, they're not. And it's up to the electorate through the ballot box at the next ballot. They need to send a very, very strong message to Westminster, to the civil service, to the government, to the judiciary, to the police. They've had enough, and they're going to change the way in which we govern by electing a government from outside the existing structures.
Thank you, Rupert Low. Thank you for your time. We're all enjoying watching you on Twitter and X. Your views. Helen has written in and says Charlie Peters and Maggie Oliver are heroes for exposing the rape gangs across the country. It is obvious why Labour won't touch it. Andy says, surely we can't deport people if they are British citizens, Matt. Well, I think we can. Let's turn to Simon Danczuk, the former Labour MP for Rochdale, who has essentially seen this cover-up firsthand. And there are people out there saying, you know, has the establishment, have authorities been working overtime to try and distract us from this issue? Just tell us your experience.
Yeah, so I was the Member of Parliament from 2010 to 2017 in Rochdale, and it was in 2012 that the Rochdale grooming scandal broke. It was new to me. I wasn't from the area originally. And as soon as it broke, I called out the ethnicity and religious aspect to this abuse. I said that they were important factors in the abuse taking place. And then I campaigned for 3 years solid on child abuse issues, whether it be Cyril Smith, historic abuse, but also the grooming scandals that were occurring across the country. And I raised lots of issues in Parliament and elsewhere on those issues. So that's the context. But what surprised me more than anything, really, is that I had senior politicians tell me not to mention the ethnicity or religious bias of those perpetrators. So the first example...
Who was that?
So first instance was Jim Dobbin, who was the MP for Harewood and Middleton at the time.
Right.
And the perpetrators tended to come from Rochdale and the victims tended to live in Harewood and Middleton. These are two constituencies co-terminus
I know
with
the
Rochdale.
seat very well.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law lives there.
And so the poor white working class girls were often from council estates in Harewood and Middleton. And he said to me at some function, because we attend the same functions, listen, don't mention the ethnicity, there's no advantage to it, it'll affect the Labour vote. And he was quite clear.
And they said that, it would affect the Labour vote?
He was quite clear about that. That was his advice
Outrageous.
to me. He's a much older MP. I'd been there for 2 years, I was very new, and he probably thought he was giving me some good advice. The second instance where this happened is more significant in my view, because it was Tony Lloyd, who was chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party. That's a very influential position within the Parliamentary Labour Party, there's no doubt about that. He was running to be police commissioner for Greater Manchester. This story broke and he came to see me because he wanted to comment on it, and it was on my patch, and he said the same thing. He said, listen, I don't believe ethnicity is an issue in all of this, and I'm going to make that clear when I raise it at Prime Minister's questions. He also and it's on the record. I mean, he made a speech in Parliament in 2012 where he said something very similar and drew comparisons with Jimmy Savile. Why, I do not know.
Can I ask you a question? When I showed the tweet earlier on by Labour MP Naz Shah, who said, oh, actually, it was an accident, I didn't mean to suggest that we should tell these young girls to shut up and we should basically, prioritise diversity. Yeah. Do you think things like that were an accident, or do you think this is actually a reflection of the Labour mentality about this issue? It's
the mentality. There's no doubt about that. I've been in Labour politics for decades, and this
you know the Labour Party?
I know the Labour Party exceptionally well. What I tell you about Jim Dobbin and about Tony Lloyd is absolutely accurate. And then the other surprise to me, having campaigned on this for 3 years solid, I met the Home Secretary on a number of occasions. She would phone me up at home, Theresa May. Theresa May. She would speak to me about these issues, child abuse issues. I went to a summit with David Cameron at 10 Downing Street. So over that 3 years, I worked with the Conservative Party, because it's not a party political issue. And yet, Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, during that time, never spoke to me or asked me about my experiences in campaigning on this on any occasion.
So can I ask you a question? When I see people like Jess Phillips, Stella Creasy, who have talked endlessly about abuse against women and children at the hands of men, but seem to say nothing at all when it involves Pakistani Muslim gangs, or when you do voice it, they say, well, actually, that's a bit far right. What's going on there? What's this reflecting within the Labour Party? I mean, are these people genuinely not interested in this issue because they would rather prioritise, you know, their Muslim constituents?
Well, they're playing politics with the issue, which I think is appalling. I just made that point that this is a cross-party issue.
Yeah,
there shouldn't be any politics to it. Yeah, absolutely. But they're worried about losing votes. That is a mentality with it. I'm not saying every Labour MP, but a proportion of Labour MPs are concerned about losing votes.
And I know you might not know him too well, but what's your instinct, your political instinct, on where Keir Starmer is on this? Do you think he gets the strength of feeling out there in the country about this issue? No,
I think I've described him before, but he fits into this North London Labour elite, and they all have a similar view of how you do politics, which groups in society are right, who you should kowtow to, who you should listen to, who you shouldn't listen to.
Well, Simon Danczuk, it's great to have you with us, telling us that first-hand experience. I mean, Paul Richards, former Labour advisor, does that tally up with your experience of the Labour Party?
No, I'm not doubting my friend Simon's story. I'm sure that's exactly how it happened. But I think the motives behind that, I think I would dispute. And there's an aspect of what you said there, Simon, which I thought was perhaps the most interesting thing, is why were the girls routinely ignored, dismissed, told they were liars and all the rest of it? Not because of race, but because of gender, because of patriarchy, and the fact that the sort of male establishment just didn't listen to these young women because they were working class and because they were girls.
So you don't think Labour's overwhelming support among British Muslims has anything to do with it? The fact that about 90% of British Muslims vote for Labour? The fact that some of those Labour ministers, like Jess Phillips, who almost lost their seat because of defecting Muslim votes. I just want to show you a quick clip, actually, by Jess Phillips. We can show the folks at home this clip.
We're a year on from the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. Years and years worth of evidence. Rishi Sunak is doing nothing. And today, exactly what happened in Rochdale is happening in every single part of our country.
Well, that was a clip by Jess Phillips before she was in government, I should say, but now in government is refusing to push ahead with this inquiry in Oldham, and so far as resisting the calls for a full-blown national inquiry.
Well, hang on. She is having an inquiry in Oldham. She is having it. That's what she announced today. So there will be an inquiry in Oldham, led by Oldham.
But not supported by the national government and not endorsing a national inquiry. Daniel, there's a risk here, isn't there, for the big parties, that this issue is going to become like the new post office scandal. This is going to become a big national debate about how on earth we allowed this systemic exploitation of children to take place.
Well, my experience I don't know Simon Danczuk very well particularly, but he was a colleague for 7 years. He certainly came across as somebody with integrity and probity in my time working as a colleague with him. He's made some very serious allegations this evening about 2 colleagues. And if those can be substantiated, then I think the Labour Party has to answer for those. There is nothing worse, I would argue, than a politician trying to somehow kowtow to a minority group for fear of losing their support. If that is true, and I have no reason to doubt what Mr. Danczuk is saying, then I think it's a scandal, very serious scandal for the Labour Party.
Well, we should say at this point we have reached out to the Labour Party for comment regarding the claims made by Simon Danczuk, former Labour MP, of course, and we await their reply.